Honesty is the best policy, or so they say. But is it true when it comes to parenting? How open and honest should we be with our kids? Does total honesty compromise us? Or is it healthy and ultimately productive? In this video, I want to share with you a couple of insights on how honest you should be with your kids and how to get them to be more honest with you. So let's get started. I recently spoke with a college-age young woman. She was visiting home, she was on a school break, and she saw her younger sister saying some really mean, really hurtful things to their younger brother. When the young woman said something to her sister, trying to encourage her not to speak to her brother like that, to be so mean to him, the answer she got back was quick and pointed, and this is what she said: "Well, Mom does it." She was referring to how her mom often talks so harshly to the kids. And she does the same thing with her husband. This girl was just following what was modeled. So do you think modeling is that impactful? I think our kids are always watching us. They know us better than anybody else. We cannot fake our kids, and we can't hide anything from them. So what we say, and more importantly, who we are, is watched very closely, and it's modeled by our children. I have watched an acquaintance of mine for years whose children regularly talk disrespectfully to her. And she often tells me what good kids they are. And for the most part, they're really great kids. But often they're really disrespectful and they're very dismissive of her. And I've seen her husband talk the same way to her for years. These kids have been watching for years how her husband talks to her, and they're just doing the same thing. My reason for sharing these examples is that if we want our kids to be honest, we have to model honesty and integrity ourselves. This actually makes me think of my grandfather, Ed Bryan. He was a tough, hardened cop, and there was not 1 ounce of touchy-feely in him. And I grew up as a kid, we were kind of physically affectionate. We were huggers in my family. And I always knew when I went to hug my grandpa that it kind of made him uncomfortable, but we kind of did it anyways. Well, my grandpa, just to kind of describe to you about him, again, he was this sort of tough, hardened cop, and he loved to wear hats that had obscene messages on them because he liked to see the reactions that he could get from people in the public. But let me tell you what I remember most about my grandfather. To this day, he's been gone for decades. I remember his integrity. He was honest to his core. If he said he was going to do something, he did it. He just had these really very strong principles that he lived by. And one of those principles was you always be on the outside who you were on the inside. There was no phoniness in him, no duplicity. In my mind, we had this really special relationship. Even though he was rough, I loved him so much. And to this day, I mean, he's been gone for 34 years. I miss him. I think about him all the time. He had such an enormous impact on my life. So when we're asked the question, how open should we be with our kids? I can't help but think that one of the more impactful ways you can build a relationship with your kid is to allow yourself to be open, transparent, and vulnerable. I'll give you a really personal example. I'm not going to give you all the nitty-gritty details, but several years ago, I went through an experience that was deeply traumatic to me, and much of it was due to my own doing. I had put myself in a situation that was as painful as anything I had ever experienced, and I was not proud of myself for this. And it caused me a lot of grief for a very long time. And it was really, one of those life-changing, gut-wrenching experiences. And at some point in my kids' lives, I decided that it was important for me to share this experience that I had gone through with them. But I needed to do it when they were of an appropriate age. They needed to be mature enough to hear, but I just felt strongly that it was something I wanted them to know about me. But I'll tell you, I worried a lot. I worried a lot about telling them this story would make them disappointed in me, that it would make them think less of me. That was my fear. I had been so disappointed in myself that I couldn't imagine them not being disappointed in me too. However, the reaction that I've gotten from each of my kids, I've kind of told them all at separate times, was completely different. It created this sort of magic of bringing us closer together. In appropriate ways, I've shared other weaknesses with my kids, and I sometimes do this as a way to relate to them, to let them know that I sort of get what they're going through as kids growing up, that I've been there too. But it always takes a degree of vulnerability for sure. But I'll tell you, I believe that when this is done appropriately with the right intent, it allows your kids to know you in a more intimate and personal way. I've had so many kids over the years tell me that they wish they knew more about their parents. They wish that they knew more about their parents' emotions. My oldest daughter has actually often told me that sharing with her my weaknesses and this one weakness that I'm talking about made her feel normal. It gave her hope that she could overcome her struggles when she grew up, because she saw me do that. She saw me overcome some of the struggles that I went through. When I am appropriately open, vulnerable, transparent, and honest, and when I model those things, that actually has brought me and my kids closer together. So to answer the question, I believe that openness and honesty is really important with our kids. Vulnerability is a gift that you give someone, and it has to be done in an appropriate way. It has to be done at the right time when they're mature enough to receive it. But I can tell you that it will positively impact your relationships when you do this. Now, before we move on to the next points, I want to thank you for watching this video. Do you ever struggle in communicating with your children or disciplining them effectively? You know, no one is handed the manual when our kids are born with all the rules and steps that you should take. We learn by trial and error. Well, that's what this channel is all about. It's about using my system of correcting and connecting to build a strong, trusting, and long-lasting relationship with your kids. If that's the kind of thing you want to know more about, then like this video and subscribe to my channel, and then share this with all of your friends. Now let's get back to the video. I'm going to end with a story that illustrates how honesty and vulnerability can improve your relationship with your kids. I'm going to tell you about a father and daughter that I worked with many years ago. We're going to call the dad John, and we'll call the daughter Emily. Emily was in a short-term treatment program for depression and anxiety and a recent suicide attempt that she had made. And while she's in this program, her dad was coming face to face with some of his own issues. He had been both physically and emotionally absent throughout most of her life. He worked long hours, he traveled extensively, and frankly, 99% of the parenting was left up to his wife. However, 4 years earlier, his wife and Emily's mom died from an aggressive form of cancer. And her illness and death was so swift that it just left everybody in shock. And Emily was really close to her mom. This is kind of who she went to for emotional support. And her dad, John, he seemed to be entirely incapable of providing any kind of emotional support. He didn't even know what to do. He was really good at providing financial support for the family, but he had no skills in talking about emotions or feelings. And so he had no idea how to deal with his wife's death, and he had no idea how to help his kids through this as well. And so he did what he always did with painful feelings. He ignored them. In fact, the unspoken family motto in their home was, keep your feelings to yourself. Well, let me tell you about Emily and how her mother's death impacted her. You can imagine she was absolutely devastated. And now she had no one to go to. Her mom was gone, and she had no one to share her feelings with. So Emily began to slowly withdraw from the world. She actually developed an eating disorder. She began self-harming by cutting on herself, and she would isolate in her room all day long. And eventually she tried to kill herself. And it was this suicide attempt that literally woke John up. If he didn't do something drastic, he was going to lose Emily. Well, now, when I meet them, Emily is in this short-term treatment program that I'm telling you about. And it was a program that gave her a lot of counseling around the trauma and grief that she was going through. But it also addressed a lot of the long-standing abandonment issues that she felt with her dad. Well, while she's going through this, her dad asked to come visit with me personally, and so he was in a different state. He flew out to see me from a different city, and we spent the day together. And among other things, we talked about his identity as a husband and a father, and he acknowledged that he had no idea how to deal with a grieving child or how to talk about feelings at all. He grew up in a home where feelings were not only not acknowledged, but talking about them was discouraged. It was unacceptable. It was absolutely unsafe. And so he didn't have the skills. But as I'm talking with John, I can see he's desperate to change. He just doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know where to start. He wanted to save his daughter. He really wanted to have a relationship with her. So we talked about what he needed to do to change and what he needed now to say to Emily. And we worked on this together, and I kind of helped him a little bit come up with this. But this is what he said to Emily. These are his words. He said, "I've been gone from you since the day you were born. I've been gone physically, and I've been gone emotionally. I let your mom raise you, and then when she died, I had no idea what to do. I am so very sorry for what you've been through and what I've put you through. I want to be close to you. I want to be there for you. I just don't know how to do that. But I'm doing my own work, and I'm willing to learn, and I hope that you'll let me." I mean, this was amazing. Talk about openness, honesty, humility, vulnerability. He was all of those things. And this was the beginning to a new relationship for he and his daughter. So I encourage you to be open and honest and transparent with your kids. Be humble. Admit when you screw up. Be good at apologizing and be vulnerable. Model for them these traits, because that will have a long-lasting impact on all of their relationships in the future as well. Hi, my name is Dr. Todd Corelli, and I have spent the last 25 years as a clinical psychologist working primarily with children, adolescents, young adults, and their families. I have worked with thousands of families around the world, and I have seen the challenges facing families. That's why I have created the Correct and Connect system that helps parents become more effective at bonding with their kids and positively influencing them. This system is completely unique. It's highly effective. I have seen this system benefit my own family and so many others, and I want your family to have this too. If you think that my experience and knowledge could be interesting or useful to your audience, then I'd love to connect with you about sharing it with them. I'm available to be interviewed for podcasts, live streams, media broadcasts, written publications, or any other forms of relevant media. You can just go to drtoddtalks.com and register your interest today, or just click the link in the video description below.